Hello and welcome to today's daily response video. I'm Zara, creative producer for People Make It Work, and I am delighted today to be joined by one of our newest associates, Miki Lentin. Hi, Miki.
Hi, how are you, Zara? How's it going?
I'm good. A little bit rainy today on the 28th of April, but
Yes.
all okay.
It was bound to happen at some stage.
Yeah. Thank you so much for spending some time with us this afternoon and for us to kind of delve into where you are at with what is happening around us in the world.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, just a big thank you for being here.
that's fine. No, my pleasure. Delighted to be here.
So to start with, let's start with that. How are you? How are you in this moment? And from that, what's been arising for you? What insights have been coming up?
And yeah, it's a really good question to start. I think I get asked a similar question pretty much every day. How are you? I'm not sure anyone's got a kind of complete finite answer to that, really. Some days are great. I wake up and I feel kind of quite satisfied, and I enjoy working at home and enjoy being with my family. And usually the sun has been out, so we've been blessed by that, which is great. But some days are really tricky, actually, if I'm being honest. Some days are very difficult, so I move from kind of feeling good, lots of work to do, lots of things to get on with, to feeling a bit despairing and a bit sad about the situation that we find ourselves in as humanity. And it's not just ourselves, it's other people who live locally. I have family around the world that I think about and worry about. So some days are great, some days not so great. And I'm sure everyone is in exactly the same boat, regardless if you live by yourself or if you live with a family. But I have been thinking a lot about kind of, where I am in the world, the work that I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and also what insights and what things I want to kind of take from the experience that we're in now. And I think I'm not the only person in thinking deeply about what's going on. So I suppose, from my perspective, I'm a relatively new freelancer, and it's great to be part of this team as well. But I only really entered the freelance world in early February, and then all of this happened, and things were looking pretty good for a while, and then a lot of the work has, to a certain extent, dried up. So it's great to be involved in something like this. But one of the things that I have thought a lot about is values and language, and it's been really interesting to see the types of work that people are doing, and also the language that people are using to describe what's going on right now. I've got a communications background, and to me, language is really important. It's something that I come back to a lot. How do we describe this situation? Is it unprecedented? Is it strange? Is it a bit weird? And what does it mean to people? So language is an interesting thing, and I think the types of language that people use and the type of language that people use is going to either put people at ease or make them more concerned. So as someone who has a communications background, language is something that I'm fascinated by, and I'm also a writer as well, so I'm really interested in the use of language. And I think that's an interesting thing for the cultural and the creative sector to look at, predominantly as well, is how they use language to communicate with their audiences. What are they saying about their organizations? What are they saying about the situation that we are in right now, and how that? And I think there's some opportunities here. I've seen some really good work being done by some not so great, such great work. But I think there's an opportunity for people to think creatively about how they might communicate with their audiences, but also to think a little bit about, as I say, the type of language that they use. And there's also a point, I think, about the tone of voice as well. I think people are looking for an authentic voice, an honest voice, and an open voice. And I think that's something that cultural organizations need to think about. It's also an opportunity for the cultural sector to think creatively about how they might improve access to their collections, for example, or access to their content and their materials. And I know that a lot of organizations are doing that. A lot of organizations are looking at how they can disseminate their collections digitally, how they can use social media to do that. And I think that's fantastic. But I think there's also an opportunity for all of us to actually learn from each other, because there's some fantastic best practice going on, not just in the UK, but around the world. And I know that many organizations are talking to each other. There's lots of kind of great conversations happening. But this is a really, really good opportunity for people to do that. And we have the technology to do that these days. You know, aren't we blessed and lucky that actually we can all sit in our, I'm in my bedroom right now, all sit in our bedrooms or wherever we are and talk to each other around the world and think about the great things that organizations are doing. And that's brilliant. So really good. I've been thinking quite a lot about that.
Yeah, to some degree, it's the sense that we are all in this together. And I guess with how advanced our digital world is, it is great that we are able to still connect, even in
Yes.
isolation, and still learn from each other.
Absolutely. Oh no, I think there's huge amounts of learning going on, and this is a really good time for people to take that time and actually talk to each other, because we're all collaborating. Even though I have heard that for some people it's very exhausting to sit in endless Zoom chats, but actually it's a great time to collaborate. Like, I mean, you mentioned about kind of all of us being in this together, and I think that's a critical thing as well. However, one of the other areas that I've heard a lot of conversations about this and been thinking a lot about this is how the cultural sector has an opportunity now to maybe look at its audiences as well. I think that we're seeing that perhaps we aren't all in this together as much as we would like, that some communities are suffering a lot more than perhaps other communities. And we do need to think about how cultural organizations engage and look a bit more locally at who's living around them and who their residents are around their locations, and how they communicate to those audiences as well as their existing stakeholders and customers. I think that's really important, because I think there's an opportunity now for cultural organizations to maybe shift the balance slightly towards those communities that maybe don't have as much as perhaps you and I might have these days, and who maybe in the future might be lacking in educational resources, or in learning opportunities. And I think there is an opportunity now for the cultural sector to take a really good look at itself, say, well, actually, in the future, there might be social distancing issues. So can we have school groups, plenty of school groups come into our museum or gallery? Well, maybe not. So actually, we might need to shift our audience focus to actually people who live locally a lot more, rather than people traveling from far and wide to our organization. So I think that's another interesting thing that I know a lot of organizations are grappling with. The other thing that I'm interested in as well is leadership as well. And, you know, we've seen some really great leadership around the world, I think, especially by our female leaders, I hasten to add, people like Angela Merkel, Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand. I think they've been lauded as being compassionate and you know, perhaps, yeah, just more compassionate maybe than some of our male leaders around the world. And I think there is a call now for authentic leadership, for leaders to be open and honest, and also to be very confident in saying that they don't know the answers to things, because who knew that this was going to happen to us? Well, unless you were a scientist, you know, we wouldn't have guessed 6 months ago that we would be in this situation right now necessarily. It's so far-fetched, actually, isn't it? But it's okay, I think, these days to say you don't know the answer. You can scenario plan and you can communicate well, but you might not necessarily know what's coming down the road in 2 months, 3 months, even a year's time. So I think those leaders and those executives, in my opinion, who are honest and say they don't know the answers to things, that actually things might change and we might need to be flexible and nimble in our approach. I think that's very brave. And that to me shows good leadership, actually, rather than sort of saying, yes, I know the answer and I know exactly what's going to happen. Because frankly, I think most people know that they don't believe that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's an interesting thing that I've been thinking about. And the final thing that I would say as well, that, you know, as I said before, I'm someone who's worked a lot in communications. I think organizations, their future organizational communication strategies are going to be really interesting to read. And I think any comm strategy that the organizations may have had in the past has perhaps been thrown away, because actually there is a real opportunity now to look deeply at internal comms, for example. How are you communicating? What are you saying to your staff? How are you engaging with your stakeholders? And Are your stakeholders still the same that they were a few months ago, or like even at the beginning of February, for example? And how are you looking at your external audiences these days? And what messages do you want to communicate to those external audiences? So I think there's an opportunity for heads of comms, directors of comms, to look at their comms strategies and think, well, actually, maybe there's an opportunity for us to think slightly differently about how we're communicating, maybe slightly more innovatively, more creatively, with a different tone of voice, for example. And maybe there are some learnings from other organizations, definitely what to look at how government is doing it. Are they doing it well? Are they not doing it so well? Look at the role of social as well. So I think that's another area that I'm fascinated by as well, is how communication strategies will change. And those who are innovative and, in my opinion, nimble and able to move, quickly in redeveloping their approach, I think will succeed better than those who don't, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. I think some of those key questions that you have poised could be really helpful as ways to action and ways to think when people are approaching, reevaluating, re-strategizing, reconnecting with audiences or creating new audiences.
Absolutely, yeah.
Something that I have been drawn to as you've been speaking, and I think it wraps around a lot of what you're talking to, is the way that you're languaging, the way that the words that you're using, and the power that words have in the ears of others. And I just wondered, with a more philosophical mindset, with a more worldview outside of work context, could you talk about kind of compassion in words and maybe mindful practices or mindful inspiration that you have?
I don't know if I have mindful inspiration, but I use mindfulness a lot personally. It has helped me enormously in the past, even before this, actually, in the past 4 or 5 months of my life, and also in the past kind of couple of months that we've been living through this as well. I think taking the time and the space for yourself is incredibly important, and to remember what's real and what's not real, and to really try to understand that as well. I know it's incredibly hard for many people, including myself. So there's no quick fix solution to this, but I think people get a lot from practicing things like mindfulness, and also remembering that actually, to me, language is very important. As I say, I'm a writer as well, and I think how people express themselves and how people write about what's going on right now is critically important. Knowing how to differentiate fact from fiction, for example, how to kind of really understand the true meaning of what people are saying, how to kind of really clarify in your own mind what's really going on, who to listen to, who not to listen to. And one of the good things, in my opinion, like when I come from the library sector, I spent 10 years working at the British Library, and libraries, for example, are always known as trusted institutions because they have, essentially they have deposits of information that have been deposited with them for centuries. And that's incredibly powerful. That if you walk into a library and you ask for a copy of a book or a newspaper, you are going to get what you've asked for. You're going to get the factual information ultimately. So the cultural sector and the library sector, in my opinion, is very trustworthy, and it has a role to play in enabling audiences and people to feel that they can go to these organizations and trust them. And that's where, in my opinion, an authentic voice comes from, that idea that who can you go to trust? And there should be no reason why you shouldn't go to the cultural or the creative sector as a sector that you can trust and believe in to give you what you want, be that compassion, be that entertainment, be that enjoyment, or just educational materials for your own purposes. So I think many institutions have brilliant resources on their websites and on their social media platforms that you can access as well. And the only other thing that I would say is, I talked a little bit about technology earlier on, and I think now is the time also for organizations to look at their internal comms technology. What platforms are they using to communicate and to disseminate information to staff, many of whom I'm sure have been furloughed or who are in difficult circumstances, but also just to stay in contact with people. Intranets, Slack, Trello, whatever it might be. use the tools that are out there, because they can all be incredibly helpful in ensuring that, you know, people people remain informed, and that's critically important these days.
Yeah. Wow. So much food for thought. Thank you. Thank you so
You're
much
very welcome.
for spending time with us this afternoon, and stay well, stay safe. Thank you,
You
Mick.
too. Thanks a lot. Yeah, thank you.
Nice to have you part of the team.
Yeah, I'm delighted. Thank you so much.
Thank you.